Automotive. Welcome to the Millionaire Car Salesman Podcast, the #1 resource for automotive sales professionals, managers, and owners to learn how to make money, accumulate wealth, and to all out ball out in the auto industry. And now your hosts, Sean V. Bradley and L.A. Williams.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Automotive.
Hey everybody, this is Sean V. Bradley, the president of Dealer Synergy. And you know what time it is. We're about to get that money, all right? And we have a special interview. My man, Cody Carter from Tustin Toyota in California. He is the #1 car salesman in the world, like Duck Dodgers, you know what I'm saying? Like planet Earth. But he's absolutely unequivocally the best leasing agent in the entire United States. This man sold 154 cars in March on the showroom floor. Let me repeat that. He's a showroom sales consultant that delivered 154 units on the showroom floor in the middle of the pandemic. And he did it 93% or 90 something percent leasing. So Cody Carter, Cody Carter, you. Question for you, my brother. Yeah, you. How the hell did you do that? That's what I want to find out today, man, is how did you build this incredible business based on leasing? So I'm going to start with the first question is, do you think leasing is viable, especially in this current economy right now?
I think it's even more important in this current economy with the way, pricing is going, with a lot of stores that are charging, above MSRP, right? We don't know what the economy is going to hold in just a couple of years. And we may see a massive negative equity, pool of customers on these purchases in just a few years. With the leasing, you have the opportunity to get them out sooner, right? Because people are laying them away 72 months, 84-month, purchases. Those customers are going to be stuck for a long time and have a negative, connotation to the dealer versus these leases that we're doing at 36 or 48. We have the option to get them out at a much sooner turn, which is good for you. And it's also good for the customer experience at the end of the day.
No, you hit it right on the head, my friend. A lot of times, like I hear people excited in the group, they're posting record grosses, but who's really paying for this stuff? When you're putting people to sleep, when you're charging $10,000, $12,000 over sticker, when you're charging $8,000, $10,000 over on a used car. I know used Tellurides that are getting sold, used pre-owned Tellurides that got like 8 to 10,000 miles on them are selling for 8 to 10 G's over sticker in some places. I swear to God. I mean, you got to think about this. I mean, like that's a lot of negative equity. When the market shifts, I mean, like, again, if we don't have a plan, you're putting people to sleep. It's going to be really difficult in the future. So you're absolutely right. If you are going to compete and you are going to put people in situations where they're going to be out of equity, et cetera, it's way better to put them into a lease so you can get them out of it a lot easier and a lot faster. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Yeah, 100%. Because it's going to be scary, in a couple of years when you see these customers that are $10,000, $15,000 flipped in these cars that you put them in, and they're going to come back to you and say, "What did you do to me?" Right? And you're just going to, hide out or tell them like, "Hey, I can't help you." Versus my guests are going to be able to, flip into another lease, no problem. Even if we have to make a few of the payments, it's not going to be a big deal. I'm not going to be telling them you're $10,000 upside down.
No, I would agree 100%. And the other aspect is even without the economy being what it is, or the market being what it is, leasing, even in the traditional, I don't want to say normal because there's no normal anymore. The normal went out the door with the Thanos the lip, you know what I mean? But
new norm.
Even in what was the traditional way of the market, that we've had for decades, right? Leasing was phenomenal because instead of, like we talked about, 72-month, 84-month finances and shit like that, if you have people in a 36-month or 39-month lease, there's usually pull-ahead programs. Now, a pull-ahead program, for the people that are not really familiar, is that the manufacturers usually have incentives to pull people out of a lease earlier. Can you talk about, does Toyota have or had a pull ahead program or early lease termination protocol?
So Toyota doesn't have a pull ahead program, but like Lexus does, right? So it's like 6 or 9 months. The nice thing though, with the Toyota brand itself, like we've always had really good resale value, right? So 6 months ahead of time, you could call them and no problem flip them into another lease at, the same or similar payment So Toyota didn't necessarily need that. They didn't even have a loyalty program because Toyota's customers are so loyal. But yeah, there's a lot of programs for the Volvo and BMW that they have pull ahead available to you.
Now, again, explain this, because there's a lot of car people that just still don't get it. How putting somebody in a lease really makes their whole situation more advantageous. Break it down for the people in the bleachers.
There's a lot of things with leasing. I tell a lot of my customers, when they say why lease, I'm like, every single person has a different scenario as to why, right? It could be affordability. Like, these vehicles are getting so astronomically expensive. Like, when you're looking at, $80,000 Fords, F-150s and things like that, those payments are over $1,000 a month. There's an affordability standpoint to it. There could be that they just want to be in warranty at all times, right? There's so many different reasons.
I love this. Let's stick with affordability. We're going to go category by category. Okay.
Sure.
So let's put this in perspective. Let's just use, because you're familiar with Toyotas. What is the MSRP in a loaded out Tundra?
A loaded Tundra now, 77,000 MSRP.
Okay. MSRP. And what would be a finance? And now, is your dealership selling those vehicles over sticker?
Yeah. So we're selling at market value, whatever that is, depending on the vehicle.
Okay. So again, there's potentially, what's the most that you sold a Tundra over? 3,000, 5,000, or your store? What would you say? 10,000?
The minimum that we're taking on a Tundra is 6,000 over, right? They're typically 10 to 15.
Okay, so let's put this perspective. If it's 77, right? Again, where are we at? Like, what is that? Like $84,000, $85,000? That's there, plus tags, registration, motor vehicles, whatever. Again, we're like almost 90 grand. What is a finance on a 60-month finance off of 90 grand?
It's almost $2,000 a month. With everything in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the point, is that's what a finance is on that vehicle, especially in this economy. Now let's go through with your leasing. Like right now, what could you lease a Tundra for?
A Tundra Capstone hybrid is probably leases around $1,300 a month, at 48 months with the $10,000 addendum. It's
with the $10,000.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're making all the wood, you're making all the gross. Okay. Yeah. But you have almost 50%, of the cost. You're looking at, $1,300 versus, $2,000 or $2,050 or something like that. And it's shorter term. So again, this gives you what? Fluidity, right? You've got options. This looks advantageous to somebody. I get the same truck. Okay. However, this option, I could save literally $700 a month, times 48 months. That's a lot of money that I could save. That's a lot of reasons why, leasing looks advantageous. But I love Covey because he talks about win-win. The win to the customer is that they get the same vehicle, or sometimes better vehicle, more options, more features at a fraction of the cost. To the salesperson, they get the full gross, the full pop, commissions, everything, but they get to turn that customer quicker to get them to come back in. Now, again, if it's a 48-month lease, you might be able to bring them back in 39, 42 months and get them to something else. That's a quicker turnaround. Am I understanding?
Yeah, for sure. Look, we're putting these people in 48-month leases. It's not been the norm, prior to COVID, where everything was 36 or less. But we're telling the guests, like, hey, at 36 months, you're going to hear from us, and we're going to explore the option to get you out sooner. And who knows what the economy will be like, or what the programs will be like, but we'll be able to explore that option. You're not stuck for 48 months. We have the option.
Okay. Now there's misconceptions. The gross is, okay. I heard you say that it's 10 G's, addendums. So here's what I'm understanding, and which most people don't understand. I want you to explain to this about money factor and residuals versus invoice and MSRP, because it's a whole different game. A lot of untrained salespeople. There's a lot of managers I know that don't understand leasing very well, especially down south. And that's not a shot. That's not a disrespect. It's just traditionally and statistically, there's way less leasing in the southern states of the United States than there are compared to the Northeast and on the West Coast in California. But explain this is that you could make just as much gross, if not higher, and keep the payment lower with the leasing. Am I speaking truth, or am I misinformed?
I would think that the grosses are a lot higher, in regards to the leasing programs that are like, if you know how to work a lease, you're going to make more gross, right? Because especially if I'm showing somebody a $2,000 or a $1,500 payment on a purchase, that's shocking. Like, even to myself. And I look at these and I'm like, oh my gosh, I could never imagine paying that payment. And then you can show them a $1,500 payment or a $1,000 payment, whatever the payment significantly less. That's a lot more appealing to the customer, the consumer, and you can make a lot more gross in that.
Okay, so this is the thing, and I'm glad that you broke that myth. A lot of people think just because you lease vehicles, there's no money in leasing. You're out of your mind. Listen, if you suck selling cars, you're going to suck leasing. If you're good at selling cars and making gross, whether it's a lease or finance, as long as you understand the rules of engagement, you're good to go. But can you explain some of the terms, like, what's a money factor and what's a residual, and how does that affect what the gross is and the profit is of the car?
Yeah, so the money factor is considered like a rent charge. It could be, equivalent to what an interest rate is if you do the math on it, right? And right now, as rates start to climb a little bit, we're seeing money factors have stayed pretty solid. And so when I'm showing a customer, 5% or 6% interest on a purchase, and depending on what bank you're using, right now we're showing 2.7% equivalent money factor. So the rate is a lot, more what people are used to seeing. And so when you show them that, they're like, hey, well, look at the interest rate equivalent of this money factor is 2.7. They're like, oh, I like that, versus 5% or 6%. Right. So the banks are still, depending on who we're using, are still having really great rates. And if you know the different bank programs that are out there, you can use that to your advantage, when you're doing a comparison. I had the perfect comparison was last night. I had a guest that was looking at a Prius, right? He's like, well, why is there a $4,000 addendum to the price? And I was explaining, how the market's going. And they mentioned one of my competitors, right? Well, so-and-so will sell it for MSRP, but I have to wait a year, right? I'm like, okay, great. Well, let me show you my payment today. You can get the car in a week is X. It was $520. Right? The payment's $520, or you can wait a year and you can buy it for MSRP and the payment's $560. Are you going to wait a year to pay $40 a month more? Right? It's, if you know the different programs that are out there, if you become a leasing specialist, even at the desk, they can make gross, we're 4,000 over MSRP. We can get the deal today and still take care of the customer.
And that is phenomenal. Now explain what the residual is.
Yeah. So residual is what the bank sets. It's not set by the dealer. A lot of times customers get that confused, right? The bank determines what they believe the value to be, 36 months down the line, 48 months down the line. It's a risk number to them. They don't want to necessarily set that number too high and potentially, the vehicle's worth less than that. You just return it, and that's the bank's risk, right? If the residual's 30 grand and you bring this truck back and it's only worth 25 grand, that's the bank's problem, because you as a consumer just return it and walk away. So they typically will set them at a realistic value for you to buy it, so you feel like you're getting a deal up, if you wanted to keep it. But, there's no risk for the consumer based on the residual, because you can always walk away if it's less than that.
So now another misconception is that the dealerships, I can't tell you how many dealers, man, are so misinformed. I'm talking about like senior managers. I'm blown away. They think that the best leasing programs come from the manufacturers. And so you and I both know that's absolutely absurd. Some vehicles absolutely are correct, but some are not. And that's because the banks, the credit unions, and these other agencies or financial entities have the ability to change money factors, have the ability to change residuals, so they can reverse engineer and back into the numbers. Can you please talk about this? Because again, like I asked why people don't, lease, and it's like, because we can't make any money with leasing our manufacturer. I'm like, well, then why don't you have other banks? Oh, because nobody leases as good as Toyota or leases as good as Ford, leases of this. And I'm like, bullshit, that's not true. What's your opinion?
Well, first off, the manufacturer is always going to push super hard to your, to upper management to only use them, right? We've gotten pushback prior, about that same scenario. They want you to use them. They want to make the money themselves. But there's other lenders out there, like credit unions, there's US Bank, there's Ally, that run these different programs. And they have a bunch of people in a room that are trying to figure out how to outperform your captive lender, right? So they send me scenarios every month of, we're better on this, we're better on that. They can either offset it different ways. Some banks will push the residual sky high and, put the rates high to offset their management of loss. Or you have like the credit unions, they offer a really low money factor rate, and then they offer a conservative residual, right? So that they have very little risk. But like, for example, with Toyota, the rates like right now on standard rates like 7% versus the credit unions at 2.7%. So it's, half the rate, of course the payment's going to be better. And that makes you have a lot more competitive advantage in this current market from somebody who's only using, their captive. I lost the audio. You're on mute.
Yeah. So you are a salesperson. Now, a lot of people don't realize this, but you sell more cars than not just the average dealership, but almost 60% more than the average dealership. The numbers are 16,537 franchise dealerships in the United States as of 2022. That changes daily, obviously, but around 16,500 franchise dealerships, another 40,000 independent. The average dealership sells 96 cars, and you sold 154 cars in March in a pandemic. So with one freaking assistant, which is insane to me. But you really personify car sales like owning your own business. And that's why you self-educated and immerse yourself in leasing and everything leasing, which includes the banks. So can you talk about how important is it to develop a network of banks and relationships with the actual bank reps, even as a salesperson?
Yeah, because when I first started trying to get a couple of these banks, I went to the management. I didn't get much response, right? Because they're used to going one way. And so I just decided I'm going to reach out to these different reps and see, if I at least get some information, and then if I can present the information to the management, right? And it just started with one bank. We started with US Bank. It was pretty successful, but I had to learn the program myself because nobody else was going to help me. They didn't care to use that. So once I reestablished a relationship with them, it just shows, hey, this could work, right? So let's bring on other lenders. And what allows us to do is no matter what, there's no time saying like, oh, there's not a good lease program for that car, right? Because some lender is going to want that car, right? So we can look at all of the different programs available and select the best for the dealer, for the consumer, to make the most money, but also get them a fair deal. And as that grew, you start to grow relationships with, the buyers, right? Because they're the ones that telling you yes or no, whether this person's getting financed or not, right? And that, it's been several years now where I've known a lot of these people for a long time. And, the desk manager can call and they'll say, oh yeah, we're not going to do that deal. No, we're not doing that deal. And then I'm like, well, there's a decline in here. Let me call. So I call, we'll spend 5-10 minutes talking about nothing, right? It doesn't, we're friends. And then I'm like, oh, by the way, I have this deal I want you to look at for me. I'd really appreciate it. And it's approved. Don't worry. Right. And that's just based on relationship. It's not, there doesn't have to be a title of, I'm the manager, I'm the desk manager, sales manager. It's like, well, that's Cody. He's a friend of ours and he sends us a lot of deals. So we're going to take care of him no matter what. And it's unique, to have that many different people that I can call on for help at the bank, to allow these deals to happen. And that's what allows these customers that sometimes you're getting declined everywhere, right? You're like, I've tried everywhere. Well, Cody knows so-and-so at Ally, and Ally likes that credit profile and they're going to buy it. We're going to make a deal.
So Cody, if we were going to take this back to just the basics, let's just say that you were teaching a master course, which by the way, folks, Cody Carter has his own platform called Sell Like Cody. And we're in the process of building it. Think of me like the owner of a record label, and Cody's one of my rock stars, you know what I mean, on the label. And, part of what I was really intrigued is having a salesperson at Cody's level to be able to teach everything. Cody's not leaving Tustin Toyota selling cars. He's going to keep selling cars, but he's just going to get a lot of checks in the mail from his platform. You feel what I'm saying? So Cody, if we're flushing out the leasing section, let's just say I'm a salesperson, right? And whether I just started selling cars yesterday or this morning, or I've been in the industry for 30 years, but I want to really start to learn about leasing, what's the very first thing? So just talk to me like I'm one of your students now. Like if you were going to be a national leasing trainer, what's the first thing that I need to know and learn about leasing so I could start benefiting from the power of leasing?
I think, it's talking about the objections, right? With the customer, because there's so many bad connotations when it comes to leasing. My dad told me, no, don't lease a car, things like that. So you need to know all the reasons why a lease would make sense to be able to combat all of the no's, right? And because leasing is going to fit, I'd say 90% of consumers, if you know how to structure the lease properly, if you know how to listen to them and get by those objections. And then next with that is, even before you get into all the banks that, the things that I have that other stores don't have, it's understanding your lease program for your manufacturer, because there's some things in there that could make you so much different than the competitors. Even before I signed these banks, I was getting into things, security deposits and one pay leases, and they would call other stores. The other stores like, oh, we don't do that. No, we don't do that. Oh, this Toyota doesn't do that. And I'm like, that's their program. And if you don't know your own program, it's going to hurt you. You're going to because I've created deals out there that took other dealers months to figure out how to do it. And it was just using Toyota's own program.
Okay, so let's talk with that. And again, this strategy and this concept is for any manufacturer, but you are a Toyota certified master sales consultant. So let's talk about this. Give us some details about Toyota, for example. So before we get into the objections and rebuttals, I want to start with, knowing your leasing program. So tell me about Toyota's leasing program, especially things that you think that the average salesperson, especially the sucky salespeople, that don't know about Toyota's leasing program. Can you go over some things?
So one thing you always hear, like what I do, we don't do as much right now, but like security deposits, right? So people think security deposits for people with bad credit or poor credit. It's not. The security deposits with Toyota are more for the people that have the money, right? That have the excellent credit, that they can essentially buy down the rate by giving you money up front. And at the end of your term, you receive that money back, everything that you put into it. So we've done Tacoma leases. We're like, hey, I need you to give me $3,000 up front as a security deposit, technically 9 security deposits. Like, give me the $3,000 up front. You're going to save $40 a month in payment. And at the end of the term, when you return it, Toyota's going to mail you a check back for that same amount that you gave them. It's basically limiting some risk, and then they can use it for, they can make some money on the interest of holding your capital. So that, that's one scenario when people think security, they're like, oh, I got good credit. I don't need security deposits.
No, that's a great point right there. Let's talk about that. Brother, I'm telling you, spot on. That's exactly why we're doing this interview right here. That's a big nugget. A lot of people are always racing to the bottom. I'm like, oh, 0 down, 0 a month. I agree, except if it's going to save me money. And again, if people have money, and it's just common sense stuff. Look, you can put 0 down, but your payment's going to be this. I have a way where I could save you an extra $40 a month payment, but this is how it works. Toyota, wants a security deposit. So how would you explain it to me? Like, if I'm one of your clients, this role play. When I go like this role play. Explain.
Well, yeah, but even before we get to that part, like if you talk about like terminology, right? Security deposits are not money down, right? Because when someone says, I want to do 0 down, yes, you are doing 0 down because you're not reducing the cap cost of the car. So technically, money down and security deposits are completely separate.
No, and good catch, because again, I'm lumping this in like the average salesperson, the freaking 9 car, 10 car a month person that doesn't pay attention, has shitty training and 0 accountability. They're not gonna be able to differentiate that. They're not gonna catch that when they're talking to somebody. So I love what you just did. So let's say I'm a real prospect, I'm right in front of you. And, I'm like, I'm going to jump into Cody on this Tundra. These payments are a little bit higher than I thought. Is there anything you could do to get the payments lower?
Yeah, definitely. So I just want to show you, I'll show you the 2 options, right? So you got your normal lease payment that I presented you already on the Tundra. The other option would be that you can do what's called security deposits. Toyota allows up to 9. Right. So wait a
minute. Like security deposits, I've got good credit. I don't need to put a security deposit down. What are you talking about?
After these messages, we'll be right back.
Attention auto dealers. You need an opportunity to do business. AutoWeb is one of the largest suppliers of high quality leads. High quality buyers. At a 10% closing ratio, you will be at less than $190 per car sold. Don't just settle for what you get. AutoWeb can fully customize your results through targeted markets and or zip codes, and as a partner, you will get premium placement within search results. Who better to do that than literally the people that invented automotive internet sales? If you want to sell more cars more often and more profitably, then you need AutoWeb.
No, you're right. And with Toyota, it's a little bit different. It's not like an apartment where we need a deposit because your credit's not the best. It really, most customers that are using it have the top tier credit. They have money in the bank that could be used towards security, right? And basically, if you're pretty much going to want to do the max, it doesn't make sense to do anywhere less than the max, right? So with 9 security deposits in this particular scenario, you're going to put $4,000 in security, but your payment's going to be roughly $40 a month less. And the thing is, at the end of the term, once you return it in about 30 days, Toyota will mail you back that same deposit. So it's not like it's not making you money, but it's saving you money more than it being sitting in your bank percentage-wise.
Yeah, wait a minute. So Cody, I just did the math. You're telling me that if I put this 4 G's down right now, and it's not down really, you explained it's a security deposit, not only will I get my $4,000 back at the end of my lease, right? I will also be able to save $1,920, which is $40 over 48 months. Okay.
Yes.
So I need to just figure out, if I kept that money, would I make more than $1,900, over the next 4 years, which is possible if I'm not a dope. But if I'm lazy and I don't have really investment strategy, the market's kind of shot right now and everything's overpriced, this might make the sense to be able to I could think of it like I'm putting $4,000 in a savings account and putting it away. I'm scrolling it away, which I'll get back. But simultaneously, that's allowing me to save about $2,000 over the course of the next 4 years on this lease. Am I understanding that, Cody?
Yeah. So typically I'll tell people like, hey, you're not making money on it, but you're saving roughly 40 to 50% of whatever you're putting in security in monthly payments, which you can't really, with money, you're not going to, unless you know exactly what you're doing, to make 40% on your money is difficult. So this is an easy way, a passive way to just allow that to happen.
No, see, Cody, I love that, because that was a good rebut on what I just said, because I was like, I'm not making money on it. Yeah, but I'm saving money, and I'm saving, again, like 40%. That's a lot. That's definitely there. Usually the average return will be like 8 to 12%, depending on how aggressive the investment opportunity is. See, I love this. Now let's go back into the interview mode right here. Cody, this is awesome, but it takes a leasing subject matter expert that understands this to be able to not only implement it, but be able to articulate it and make a non-expert understand this and make it make sense to them.
Yeah. In addition to that, so like the security deposit is one way, right? And then there's the step above that, because you can save a whole point in money factor or rate by doing a one pay, right? And that was kind of unique in my area. I did a crazy amount of one pay leases, right? Where hey, you want to save the ultimate amount of money? Let's just pay the whole lease up front, right? So you pay the entire lease up front for an additional savings, and you won't have a payment the whole term. Right. And when you can show them the dollars, in most cases, it made crazy sense. We did Tacoma leases, like 4-door 4-cylinders for $3,000 for 2 years. You can give me $3,000. You can drive the truck for 2 years. And then COVID hit. We bought them back for more than MSRP. These customers, they got a killer deal. They were walking in like, I can't believe you sold me this truck, and I can't believe you're paying me more than I bought it for. It's nuts.
Wait a minute, explain that, because so explain what you just said, because that's crazy.
Yeah, so we did Tacoma 4-cylinder 4-door trucks, right? They're pretty basic truck, but they're nice. And we were selling them $3,300 one pay lease, and you had customers lined out the door, right? So you're telling me I write you a check for $3,300. I have no payments for 2 years. You're like, yeah. Like, you do the math on over 24 months. That's a crazy cheap payment equivalent, right?
Right.
No one planned on COVID, so they got even better. The deal was even sweeter than they thought it was.
Okay, so 3,300 divided by 24 months, that's like $137 a month is on the lease. That is insane. Yeah. And so you were doing a ton of these. Oh
yeah, every single one of that model code, it in freight was all sold. Every one of them was through me. So they were lining up. She just let me know when it's here.
Wow. Like, okay. And just to put in perspective for people listening to this, this is mind blowing. What would be the average finance payment on that Tacoma?
Back then it was still like 600.
Okay. Well, you're telling me
yeah.
that a finance $600 Tacoma payment with a one-pay lease, it was $137.50.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what would be a normal lease payment through Toyota for that?
It was in the 400s. It was low 400s.
Holy crap. So you're talking about massive savings.
Yeah. So once, it comes down to lots of things. It comes down to the fact that it's a one pay. The rate is significantly lower, right? In addition to that is understanding what term to use, right? Because if I put you at 36 months, it didn't make sense. But if I put you at 24 months and the residual was 80 something percent, these deals were made. But most people never selected 24 months because they didn't understand.
Yo, how did you figure this out? How did you figure out, was it just like trial and error, or is it like research, or is it just somebody teach you? Like, is there like a Yoda leasing guy somewhere in the woods? Like,
some of it's like, I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, oh, well, what if I tried this? Or what if I tried that? And my screen, I can run 4 different scenarios at a time on any particular truck. And it was like, I'm going to run every term. And it became, with my original website, I was running every term on every single car, and you could find deals that were just unreal. There was a car that, the one I always talk about, took months to figure out how I was doing it. If you get really advanced with Toyota and maybe even with the other manufacturer, there's standard rates and there's special rates. It's not always going to make sense to take the special rate if you know what you're doing. So we were taking standard rate, which was 10 times higher than special rate, but we could apply a $15,000 rebate that you couldn't do with the special rate. And we turned around and did a one-pay lease on a $50,000 hydrogen car, the Mirai. The one pay was 36 months, $10,000. But then the state of California wrote you a check for $5,000, right? So these customers, like, I remember one day I did 14 Mirais in one day.
You sold 14 Mirais in one day.
One day, because there was like, what do you mean? That doesn't make sense. And I'm like, you're right. Well, all the other stores said that you're full of it. You can't do a one-pay lease. I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Just come in. You don't believe me? Come in. I'm not going to waste my time. I'm not going to waste your time. Let's just do this. And all of a sudden it works, and they tell their friend and their friend. It's like you slam in finance with all these Mirais that nobody knows what to do with. So, it's just, it comes down to, trial and error, like you said, and just knowing what to look for. In this market, that now, if you look at that big rebate that Toyota offers, it says must finance. And the reason being is because if you don't say must finance, you can use it for lease and you can make a one pay out of it. So they're trying to avoid that.
So you changed the OEM's policy single-handedly?
On that particular model, yeah, it says must finance with 0%. So,
and it goes back to mastering your craft, man. This is what I'm hearing from you, is that if you understand how leases work, and what you said is the very first thing, or one of the first things, but I'm putting it to the first thing, is understand your OEM's leasing structure. Can you do me a favor? On the same logic, can you go through one of the things that Toyota manufacturer sucks at with leasing that you found another lending institution, a credit union or something else that basically was able to fill that void? Give us
the credit union, it's just biggest one is going to be the advantage of rate, right? And a lot of, especially in this scenario with all your manufacturers are pulling back. They're like, hey, we don't need to incentivize these cars because we're going to get them no matter what, because 90% of you dealers use us and nobody has any cars, right? So the credit union is like, well, hey, we're going to step in here. We want that volume, right? We're going to, they're even pulling back a little bit because they're like, we don't need to kill the manufacturer by $100 a month, right? Let's win by $50 a month. It's low risk, right? So they're constantly working with me because we'll run scenarios. I'm like, hey, you're losing, right? And that's the communication I have directly with these banks now. Is like, well, you're losing on this one. Do you want to win? You don't have to win them all, but I'll just send it to Toyota instead. And they're like, well, let's go back to the drawing board and let's make the program better, because they want every deal that they can. So it's an interesting, unique thing that they're some of these banks are very flexible because they want the business. And just finding ones that will work with you, that makes sense. I can't call US Bank. I can call them. I've been calling for a year now, and they want to know why I don't have send them a single deal. And it's like, because you're not listening, right? I can tell you how to win, but you don't want to listen. They're too big. But the credit union's like, hey, we want to sell $3 million a month, right? How do we do that? We'll talk to Cody and we'll see what we need to do to get there.
I love this. Okay, so let's go back to what you were saying before about the objections and knowing them, because I'm still perplexed why down south in the United States, the vast majority, the lease penetration is in the single digits, or maybe like the low teens. It's not like where you are in the 90s, and in the Northeast, it's in the 70s, 80s. So talk to us why like people object. Let's just nail them all. Let's make a list of all the objections that people have to leasing, and then just disintegrate them one by one. So the first objection is,
when I hear the South is always mileage, right? They're like, hey, I drive too many miles. Everything's spaced out. And I'm
right,
like,
so let's go in the role play. So no, yeah. Okay. So Cody, I don't want to lease a car because I put too many miles on my car.
I definitely understand. Do you have an idea of how many miles per year that you drive, or how many miles are on your current vehicle?
Yeah, well, I have a 3-year-old vehicle and I've got like about almost 60,000 miles on it. So that's almost 20,000 miles a year.
Okay. Well, the nice thing with leasing is we can customize the lease to do whatever mileage you want. Just yesterday, I quoted a guest that lives in LA and they do 25,000 miles a year, right? And so we can provide a price that incorporates all the mileage that you need. That way you don't owe anything at the end, because it's cheaper to buy the miles now. It's cheaper to buy the miles in the lease than it is for you to depreciate the car, driving it. So let me show you what 22,000 miles a year looks like, because I don't want you to go over. I'd rather give you a little bit of a buffer. So let's show what that is versus the payment on a purchase. It's still significantly less.
Okay, good. Now I'm going to give a rebuttal for that one too. So again, one thing that I've always found is that some of these people are going to buy out the leases when they're done, and sometimes it's a flip. If somebody's looking for a new vehicle that they can't afford, on a finance, and they're looking at a pre-owned, instead of going to the pre-owned route, I'm going to flip them into a new lease. And if they say, well, listen, I put too many miles on the vehicle, I'm going to say, listen, if you're planning on purchasing the vehicle, or you're even considering it as a possibility, I would consider doing the lease with the miles, because it doesn't matter. If you're going to buy this vehicle out, it doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, if you're positive that you're going to buy this vehicle out, I wouldn't say get extra miles at 20,000 miles. I'd say drop down to 10,000 miles, but only if you know that you're going to buy this vehicle out. And I even warned him. I said, listen, if you look at what the lease payment's going to be and what the buyout is, there usually would be a little bit more expensive. But me personally, I'd rather keep more of my money and spend it less and spread out my expense over X amount of years. Cody, do you like my response on that?
Yeah, 100%. And it all depends on the scenario too. It's like for us with Tacomas, right? I'll show them 10,000 miles a year and they're like, oh, I drive 15,000. And I'll use that same scenario. Like, listen, let's do the lower miles in this regard, because we know the value of the Tacoma, the history of the Tacoma resale. You don't need to buy the extra miles. But then at the same time, I tell them, hey, if we were looking at a Camry, that'd be a little bit different. I'd be telling you a different scenario. And so they kind of understand, like, okay, well, it's specific to me and specific to this vehicle, because every vehicle could be different.
Oh, pro tip. So I like that. I want to acknowledge that there. So again, this is where it reinforces what you said previously, that it's imperative that you understand the lease programs, not just from the OEM itself, but the individual lease programs and the history and the probability of each different model. I love that, Cody. That's a good pro tip. Okay, so let's go into another. So that's one, is the miles. What's the second objection that you get or people get that's pretty big?
Well, I think it's not necessarily, it's big, because most people just aren't educated on it. But I always hear like, well, my dad told me never to lease a vehicle. Right.
Right. Okay.
Or a family
Cody,
member.
Right now, let's role play. Cody, stop right there. My dad always told me not to lease a vehicle. It's the worst thing to do.
I definitely understand, because my dad told me the exact same thing. Like when I first started working for Toyota 10 years ago, I called my dad to be a co-signer on my lease of a FJ Cruiser. And he was like, hey, I'm not going to help you, because I'm not going to let you lease this car. Right. And I'm like, hey, that's fine. I'm going to do my own research. I decided to lease that vehicle. And as things went on, my dad started to see how I was educated and how the lease worked. and now he leases all his vehicles too, right? It's a stigma from the past, of how leasing at the beginning, even the manufacturers didn't know how leases worked, which then hurt the consumer. So now that, there's laws in place, the leasing has become a lot more regulated, and it makes more sense for a lot of customers, and something that might work for you as well.
I love that. Okay, good. Give me another one, another objection.
Oh.
How about this one? I don't want to rent a vehicle. I want to own it.
Well, yeah, I definitely understand, right? Money factors are potentially a rent charge, but really at the end of the day, you have the option to purchase it at a market value price. You're basically setting the residual for later, right? So this particular car is like 55%. So in 3 years from now, you could buy it for 55% of the value of the car, which is similar to what you would already owe 3 years from now on the purchase, except for your payment is now 30% less, right? It's a lot more affordable today because obviously we're struggling with the payment on this purchase, 30% less to push it 3 years down the line to see, are you going to really want this car in 3 years? Because statistics right now show 39 months, people want something different.
Not just that, Cody, but what I like to say to people is this. Well, do you pay cash for your vehicles? No. Okay, so if you're financing these vehicles, again, if you're financing a vehicle for 60, 72, or 84 months, you don't own it until you pay off the whole thing. So you're making payments. If I'm making payments, I personally want to have as much car as I can and pay as little as possible, especially with the vehicle, because it's a depreciating asset. That should be your focus. Now, I could understand your logic if you were paying cash out and you own that vehicle, but by you financing it, you don't own that vehicle. You're paying the bank owns that vehicle. So Cody, do you ever use that type of logic? And I want to hear your version.
So I think it depends, right? It's all about the relationship with the guest, right? Because I use it more as a joke, right? Because I'm like, oh, well, you don't own your current car right now, right? Because technically, the bank owns your car. If you don't make the payment in a couple of months, the real owner is going to come pick up your car, right? So you're basically in the same spot. I'm like, you just don't own anything, but we're homeowners, but we don't own our home, right? And they start to understand, like, yeah, you're right. I don't own this yet because I don't have the pink slip to this car. But I think it depends on the relationship with the guest.
Which goes back to having different tools in your toolbox. Even forget about leasing for a second, but any type of expectation, objection, and rebuttal, it's not universal. That's why there's a myriad and a library of word tracks. That's why if you're a fisherman and you have the freaking silly vest and the hat, no disrespect to fishermen, I'm just saying, I'm from New York, we don't roll like that. But you have all these different lures and all these different baits and all this different stuff and etc. Because not everything works with everybody. You need different bait, different hooks, different lures for different types of fish. Same thing here, different word tracks, different rebuttals, different explanations, and different value package propositions are going to be, I think, fluid depending on who, like you said, the guest is and the audience is. I love it. Give me another one. Give me another pushback on why people don't want to lease.
I got that. There's just so many different scenarios. I'm trying to think, because those are the main ones you're going to run across. At the moment, I'm blanking on them, but let us hear. You got something?
I think those are the big classic one. I had a friend that leased, and it was horrible. So when they say that somebody, I guess it's the same thing as the dad.
That's the same as the dad. My dad, my family member, friend.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good. Let's now transition to this. Let's go into this is very important for people. Okay, in your opinion, has the lease retention process changed since the whole inventory and the COVID thing happened? Like, before, on average, the manufacturer would say 6 months. What would you recommend that people should start to start a lease follow-up and lease retention protocol?
I think really now at this point, we're 12 months out, right? Because for multiple reasons, the equity is there that a lot of wasn't there prior, right? So you don't even need a pull ahead program. Inventory is tough. So, it may take you several months to get a replacement vehicle. So, we're talking to customers 12 months out on a regular basis, sometimes even farther out if I have inventory.
All right, well, let's start there for 12 months, right? So please, because there's a lot of people that are listening to this podcast and watching this live stream that they have shitty CRMs. The CRMs are not set up correctly. They need some dealer synergy in their lives. Yes. But until they get dealer synergy, they got to do this themselves or jury rig it. Give us what your recommendation is. Okay, so 12 months out, what does that look like? So let's just say that I leased a car from you 36 or 48 months ago, and now it's it's about a year now. I'm literally, it's been 36 months have gone by out of my 48 months. What type of communication? Is it email? Is it phone call? It's text? What does it look like 12 months out?
So typically we start out with an email, we start off slow, right? And I don't even call it like lease end options, right? Because that's always well, let's talk about your lease end options. At 12 months out, really it's, hey, I want to buy your car, right? And because the thing is, like, when I buy your car, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to drive, right? And so that's that scenario where I send out an email right now, and it's been very successful. The subject line just says lease buyout, and they're like, what does that mean, right? So they open it up, and you're just like, hey, with the way the inventory is going and COVID-19, supply is terrible, right? I want to buy your car back, and put you in a new vehicle with no money down, right? Because money's important right now, right? For people, I'll put you in no money down, and in most cases, we'll lower your payment. And all I need you to do is reply back with how many miles a year or how many miles are on the vehicle right now. Well, that's it. And then you get some people like, oh, is this real? I get lots of texts from people like, I got an email. Is this real? Yeah, it's real. What's your miles, right? So it's just a way to start off. People are like, lease end options. I'm like, I can tell you your 5 lease end options, and then you're going to disappear, right? It's, let me buy your car because I need it, and I'll give you another one. And with the equity they have, with the programs that I have, I've made plenty 15 grand deals off that email, and they're lowering their payment. So that's the start, right? Is the buyout.
I love it. Okay, good. So now you're going to send the email out 12 months out. You're going to follow up with the phone calls, or just the email 12 months out?
So email, and then we do text, because a lot of people aren't answering the phone anymore. So it's email and text.
Okay, email and text, 11 months. Okay, and then 12 months. Now, do you do anything on 11 months?
Nothing at 11, because we give them about a 2-month gap, right? So we put them at 9 or 10 months. Yeah, we send them a letter.
So then on 10 months, you're going to send them a letter. Do you have an example of that?
Yeah. So the physical letter was interesting because there's so much junk in the mail nowadays. Like, I check my mailbox every week or two, but like, we send out a letter, it's red, right? Because everything in the mail is white, right? I want this one to stand out. So it started off, you get a red letter. You're like, okay, it's got my name on the back. They're like, okay, what is it? It's pretty blank on the outside. It's just got the Toyota logo. It's got the company info on the back. And then inside it's got my business card. And it says, hey, congratulations, your lease has almost come to term. Let's make an appointment with me to go over your options. Lunch is on me, right? Just give me a call or shoot me an email. It's got my business card. It says, we look forward to working with you, and remember, your loyalty pays an additional savings, right? We have a Subway inside the dealership. And so people come by, they're like, oh, you said lunch is on you, right? Let's just sit down, we'll have lunch, and we can talk about it. Here's, we'll take care of lunch for you, right? And it's a way to just communicate. It's no pressure. Let's just give you a couple options. And
how did you create those? Like, you have a company that creates those. Don't mention the name, but you have a company that creates those things.
So,
did you create that?
So it was just originally I thought of the idea, like, it'd be cool to how do we reach customers different, right? And so my father-in-law is in promotional products. So I came to him. I said, well, this is kind of what I wanted to say, and he elaborated on that. He came up with the idea of the red envelope, and it's just putting your name out there, constantly. I got pens with my name on it, everything. It's funny because the entire dealership uses this pen. It's the cheapest pen I could find, because I tried more expensive ones, but it writes so nice that everyone uses it. So they might not buy from me, but they might go home with a pen from me, right? And they might call me next time.
I love it. Okay, and so that's awesome. So that's month 10. When's the next
10.
one?
So we're touching base basically every 2 months. So we're hitting them 8, 6, and we dropped to 3.
So what's the message at month 8?
Month 8, it's going to be an email and a text again. Let me just try to pull it for myself here for reference. So it's basically has all the autofill in there for me, so I don't have to type all these ones out. But it says, hey, your lease is coming in. It was great helping with such a great deal. I'd like to touch base early with all my guests to make sure your options are available. That way there isn't any last minute rush or stress in the process. So just give me a call and we'll go over these lease options. And then I put in there, I also highly recommend getting a lease end inspection to avoid any surprises at the end of your lease. I can help you by setting that up about 30 days in advance.
All right. I love that. Okay. So now we're at month 6. What's month 6?
Yeah. It's month 6 here. And so here's another one. Just with the Tustin logo at the top. It just says, hey, it was a pleasure helping you when you purchased your blank. I'd love to go over the lease option with you. Some of these options may include purchasing your current vehicle, leasing a new one, or trading in your lease or returning your lease. These are options to help you avoid any penalties or fees, depending on your current situation. I'd love to run some numbers with you by email or phone. Just reach out to me with your approximate miles. Right, it's just we want to give them as many options as possible in the least aggressive, pushy manner. So just constantly reiterating that message.
So we're 4 months out. What are you doing 4 months? You sending the goons out yet, or what? What are we doing?
So we're sending a text. We also send out another the letter that comes. It's a CRM automatic letter, and then so that one's fairly generic. I don't have a copy of it because I just wasn't able to find it on this notice. And then at 3 months, we're sending so 3 months, it says, again, due to COVID-19, well, first off, the title says Lease Loyalty Program. It says, due to COVID-19, our store is in need of this vehicle. And also it's difficult to purchase or to find new vehicles. I'm reaching out to you because of your loyalty to Toyota, and I'm able to get you your current model brand new with no money down and a potentially even lower payment. You can reach out to me about your inventory, or if you can help us with our inventory needs, I'm sure I can find you the exact vehicle. And again, we're always asking for the miles, right? Because I want to be able to structure a real deal. It's not this generic, hey, we're going to lower your, like the auto alert ones. The customers walk in with these auto alert letters and none of the numbers match up, and then people are pissed. So, I'm like, just send me your miles. Send me your miles is always the start to a real quote, generated by me.
Okay. So then 2 months out, what do you say? And how do you say it?
It's here. Basically, you start back at the same one that it repeats back basically to the last one where it's your lease is coming soon and I helped you with such the awesome deal, right? Because I want them to know that they got a really good deal last time, and that experience is really good. So I'm like, hey, we'll give you an awesome deal again, right? Even though the times are the way they are, you want them to feel like they got such a good deal last time, and that experience should transfer over. But I reuse the same template from month 6.
Okay. From month 6. Okay. Now what about month 1 when you're 30 days out? Do you ever go out and say, look, you guys, you got to do something. You got to turn your car in. They're going to come get you. You know what I mean? Like, do you ever...
So, I'm trying to, Hannah and I are always trying to reach out to them. And, we have the BDC team. Also, Toyota has an auto dialer, right? So auto dialing out like, hey, you need to figure out what your option is. And then if you press, I think it's like 2 or something, right? It sends me a direct email to reach out to the customer because they're like, hey, they listened to the message, now call them, right? So we're using a little bit of what I come up with what the manufacturers use. And it's funny because like you're taking these, at least in my case, I'm taking them out of these Toyota leases. Hey, yeah, bring your car back in. Oh, by the way, we're not going to use Toyota anymore because they're not going to give you the best deal. Let's give you the best deal. And so that's an interesting conversation as well.
Speaking of which, I want to just redirect for the last couple of moments that we have here, because I appreciate it's the end of the freaking month, my brother, and you're sitting here, helping our Millionaire Car Salesman audience. So I appreciate you. There's been a lot of changes, and I want to get this from you, being like the #1 leasing consultant in the country. Is like before it was easy to buy out a lease. Now that there's different levels of buyouts, whether you're the person, you're a dealership, you're a different manufacturer, whatever. Can you explain how at least Toyota does it? How many different lease buyout scenarios are there, and what the hell does that mean?
Well, first, there's 2 different types of Toyota, like depending where you are, right? So we work for Toyota, we use Toyota Financial, right? There is Southeast Toyota Financial. They're totally different, right? Southeast Toyota Financial does not allow third-party buyouts. So you can't sell your car to CarMax. You can't sell your car to Carvana. The only person that can buy your car is the dealer or yourself, right? So they're locking you in to make you come back. Toyota Financial is still one of the very few manufacturers that or the banks that will allow you to do whatever you want. They still believe that you have the right to go wherever you want as much as we want you back. You could sell your car to CarMax, you can sell it to Honda, you can do whatever you want. We still allow that. But there's a lot of manufacturers that don't. And that's always a fun conversation. I think it's wrong that they do that, just because, you're getting customers like, hey, I have a GM. What's my trade value? And I tell them the trade value. Here's your trade value. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. So my lease is ending. And I'm like, oh, I can't do that. All right. That is between you and the manufacturer, you and the bank only. I can't help you with that. You need to figure out either buying it out yourself, which just makes an extra step. And I just think that it gives a bad customer experience to know that you're basically holding them hostage.
Good. One of the questions that I've had some of our clients want them to ask, because we told them that we're going to be interviewing you today on this, that's what they're getting a lot. How do you overcome that? So like because you're selling cars, man, you're leasing cars, that shit is frustrating. How do you handle the scenario when somebody just wants to, term their GM lease and you can't? So what do you do to not piss off the customer? And what do you do to try to help the customer? Yeah,
a lot of times when the frustration, it's not towards you, because first off, I don't work for GM. Yeah. So like there's kind of that part where you're kind of lucky in that regard, because you're not the one telling them, well, you only can come to me. Right. I'm just saying, well, unfortunately, your manufacturer has made a decision to not make it easy on you. Right. So that's like the potential is you could buy this vehicle out, but you either need the cash or you need to go get a loan, which hits your credit and things like that, short term, just to trade it out, creating this extra difficulty. We also have a couple companies locally that, that I kind of partner with on the side that they'll buy it out, right? They're going to send, depending on which company it is, they'll even give a check to the customer for the entire amount and have them go pay it off, right? Or they'll send a check in the customer's name to the bank paying it off for them. So we have some option to do it. It's just an extra step, and explaining that extra step and why you have to do it is sometimes just, it just takes some work.
Yeah, I think that you're shocking some people right now, because people are like, what resources, what companies, and this and that. So you don't have to go through all that right now, but you're telling me that you have a network of companies that could solve this problem.
Yeah, there's a few big names which we won't mention today, but there's some companies that are doing this because they either have the dealer network or they have the capital and are willing to take the risk on it. But yeah, there's an option to do it.
But Cody, in your Sell Like Cody platform, you will disclose all of those resources and all of those partners, correct?
Oh yeah, we'll talk about it for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, good. All right, man, this has been incredible. What didn't I ask you? What should you, as we start to wind down right now, what do you want people to know about leasing, or how to maximize leasing, or, overcome false thoughts and fulfill expectations with leasing? What say you?
I think we did really well when I talked about different, the understanding leasing. I think the biggest thing is just being able to talk, in a manner that, with intelligence, right? Because if the customer gives you any blowback or they ask you a question, you got to run back and ask somebody else, right? That's loses credibility. It's learning, every little portion so you can discuss it with them. I educate the customer, what's their interest rate? And I'm like, well, listen, first off, there's not an interest rate. It's a money factor, right? And then they're like, oh, okay, I've never thought of that, right? So I think start at the basics, keep it simple, learn, what's within your lane, and then you'll pick up more along the way. So I don't think we necessarily missed anything right off the bat. I think that we covered it very well.
All right, good. I love it, man. Listen, I am so impressed with you and all that you've accomplished in the middle of a freaking pandemic. It's just mind blowing, my friend. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your knowledge with the Millionaire Car Salesman group and the podcast and Clubhouse.
So there you have it, the Millionaire Car Salesman Podcast. This podcast comes to you every week from the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. If you have a question about the show or would like the chance to become a guest, feel free to contact us directly at 856-546-2440 or email us at millionairecarsalesman@gmail.com. This program is a presentation of Synergy Records, produced by Tiana Mick and L.A. Williams. Production and engineering by L.A. Williams. The Millionaire Car Salesman Podcast is hosted every week by L.A. Williams and the Millionaire Car Salesman himself, Sean V. Bradley. The Millionaire Car Salesman Podcast can be found everywhere, so please don't forget to review, subscribe to, and share the show. Thanks for listening to the Millionaire Car Salesman Podcast, and remember, where I'm from, money provides options. The Millionaire Car Salesman Podcast is sponsored in part by AutoWeb.